On the 27th of May last year, Six Ways witnessed one of the most historic comebacks in Championship playoff history as the home side booked their place in this year's Aviva Premiership competition. We're here with Ricoh today to talk to Dean Ryan about his side's journey so far and what's to come for the rest of the Aviva Premiership season.
I think the most important thing was to change the strategy of the place. I think we, as a club, recognised that we chased short-term success and not been able to get out the other end, and that had put the club in a place where it becomes static, where people didn't get better and they were sort of thrashing around trying to stay in the same place. And I think we took a pretty bold decision to say, look, we've got to change this. It's not working, and we can't really see a way of evolving it. And to change it, we had to take risk, and we had to take a strategy which involved growing young players, because to trade as a club in a competitive market, we were struggling to compete with some of the bigger clubs, and we had to go back to some of the function of developing players through academies. Some of recruitment had to be focused around young players and try and make the place more aspirational, and then get growth off the back of individuals getting better. So I think when you look back on the last 2 years, what's changed is that's changed dramatically in terms of the type of person that is going to be here. Yeah, I think it's all like a balancing act, and it is, there's some hesitancy when you're trying to move a group, and I think the key is getting the core leaders in that group on side with you, and they illustrate the types of behaviours and direction you want to go. And then I think people gather more confidence, and then you start to get a little momentum, and then almost the seesaw swings and the majority start to move in the right way. And a lot gets said about cultures and things, and it's framed around people. And if you get the right people who do the right things, and slowly that group gets confidence in those things underpin success, then you start to get the majority. And once you've got the majority, the club starts to get momentum. So when we first come here, the first 8 months was difficult. We're working with an inherited group that sort of knew it was coming to an end, and it was difficult. We had to play. The thing about sport is you've got to go out there still and play every week at the same time as manage change underneath. So there were some challenges in that first year, but I think since then we're quite excited about some of the group that we've got, and about watching them develop in what's a very tough league. I think quite demanding on senior player group is a lot. Again, it's a word that gets thrown around, and it's not just age. I think when you identify core leaders, you've got to identify their behaviours. You've got to mirror what you want in your business. There's no point if you've got conflict with a group, have a different value set or different beliefs than you, then they're effectively going to influence that group more than you are. It doesn't matter what you put around the outside. It doesn't matter what words you say. It's going to be a heavy influence from the people they look up to. So I think when identifying how to take something out in a different direction, you've got to identify who those 4 or 5 people are. And if you haven't got them, you've got to go and recruit them and sell them what you're trying to do. And I think we had some here already. People like Chris Purnell were here, who we've got a huge amount of time for. But we also had to go and find them. And people like Van Velt's, we had to bring in from outside, and Dowson, Olivier this year is every single one of those will have been brought not only for their playing ability, but for the behaviours that they illustrate that I want other people to learn from. And that's when you've got that, then you can start pushing, cajoling that senior player group to really manage everybody else. I'm quite fortunate where I played probably predominantly amateur till I was about 28, 29, and then went straight into a sort of player coach role. And it's almost impossible to imagine that now in a sort of professional environment with, probably played 4 years in a sort of form of player coach. And that almost gave me the luxury of sitting with a foot in each camp at the time when the sport was changing so much. And a lot of people say, how did you manage that transition to coaching? I didn't in the first place because I was still playing. I still had the same language. I still had the same rapport and relationship with players. So I was just responsible for coming out with the ideas. And it was it was quite easy. But after like 3 or 4 years, as the game got more professional and got better around the edges, I could feel how difficult that was. I was feeling myself on the other side of the camp, and you started to dictate people's careers and finances. Very, very difficult to hold those same positions. So I was able to manage that transition from being a player across to being a coach with that sort of hybrid in the middle, which I just don't think you can do now. And it is quite a jump in terms of how you hold a relationship from one day being out there in the middle of a huddle talking to people, from the next season to be talking on the outside. And coaches, young coaches have to come to terms with that change so that they can manage growth within the group. And it's something which doesn't come easy. I think I'm I've earned loads, I think, because as I say, I think I was fortunate where it ran quite smooth and it was with successful clubs. I've learned a huge amount coming to a club that's not used to being successful and not necessarily having some of the players that are used to being successful, and you start dealing with lack of confidence and those things, which for the clubs I've been before wasn't an issue. In some ways you're trying to pull it back because the players were desperate to prove themselves. So some of the issues we found from almost the legacy of not getting things right and then what it leaves behind has been something new to me, and managing individuals, as I say, which potentially low on confidence and not necessarily attributed to doing things the right way. So I don't think you ever stop learning, and I think this is a very different environment from anything I've ever been involved in before, and therefore you have to get up to speed with what you think works and still take it out in a direction that references what works in the past. And I think the first year where there was a real clash in terms of what we knew worked in other places didn't necessarily work with this group, and we had to be quite careful of that balance at the same time as still playing every weekend. I think it's important, is once you get at the head of any sort of businesses, you end up sort of with the ability to sort of cross-pollinate across anything, and you get ideas from business. We've done some stuff, so we did a lot of stuff last year in the Championship where the games weren't necessarily preparing us for what the playoff situation was, and we did a lot of things with some businesses looking at scenarios, and we learned a lot of lessons about sort of putting in place almost scenario training. We got that from business and talking to other coaches in other sports and in this sport. You never stop learning. It's important that you listen to new ideas and then take your take on them to bring back. I think there's a real danger. Everyone goes, I go out and a million ideas, and you don't end up having any of your own. There's something to be found anywhere which is a good idea that you can bring back into your environment. Yeah, well, I'd say you go back the whole way where it was nothing. There's just 3 or 4 players deciding how you're going to play, and now, analysis is a massive part, and we are caught with a huge amount of technology, GPS analysis. There is a balance to be found with the player's development and providing the answers and the amount of data that sits around, and I think that's key with managing any technology going forward, is being able to keep competitive edge about how to stay in front of others, but at the same time actually keep an individual developing, and we're still not at the stage where technology can help you once you're out there, and it's being able to empower players to utilise the tools that are around to make them better. They're the people who make decisions, and we use everything here, but we also got to get a balance right in terms of how much focus and how much emphasis that's got on the environment. It's here as a support, and it's here to make us better. And I say, it's as it keeps moving, as it does and always will, you just got to get that balance right. It's like anything, you've got to get the big decisions right. I mean, this sport's huge now from what it was, and you're talking about World Cups, European Cups, and the last thing you want is someone deciding, everyone says it should be with a referee. The sport's too big for make real blatant errors. But again, with any technology, is how far does it go? Do we end up where everything's influenced, and you can go back they've just about got the balance right now. Is everybody's got TMO in Premiership games, not just TV. The key is just the use of it. We do bounce a little bit around using it all the time, and then we bounce back and we don't use it at all and get a little bit of frustration. We just got to find what that middle ground is, and I think, as I say, use of it over the last 12 months is starting to show us going in the right way.